And so when I say make your UX beautiful, it's really accretive to that stuff. It's that emotional connection that users can have with your brand, with your product, and them liking you enough that they want to come back.
So we're gonna switch gears a little bit and just talk about, your first or second or third startup. Like, how do you get people to join you? You're kind of like the Pied Piper. How do you get people to join and believe in your vision? A lot of these guys are going to start businesses and need, a co-founder. How do you do that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I get this one all the time. One is put yourself in play, and there's this really interesting full of these again platitudes. There's this. I think it's like a Navy SEAL credo or something, where underscoring this phrase is a sense of confidence about the fact that, look, it's going to happen. And I think the saying is, put yourself in play. Just do, even if you don't have it all figured out to the last detail. If you're in play, if you're in an environment where you can't help but collide with other people who are wanting to do the same things as you, you're gonna find each other. So there's kind of a step function up that you can take. This is definitely one of those. The fact that you've elected to be here is a big deal. This is how you find other co-founders. There are other things like this, whether it's Startup Weekend, and Rover is one of those where it was literally Greg Gottesman shows up. I happen to be a judge. I see him pick up a couple of guys that was interested in this concept. He'd never met him before. That was Friday night, and then by Sunday night they have their pitch worked out. They win the competition. They get funded. They're going like gangbusters now. I don't know how many employees they have, but their growth is amazing. So putting yourself in play and not being afraid to. I know that we have limitations of time, or those of you who are like me, where your parents, that. But go to as many of those things as possible. I don't mean to be self-serving, but it's a truthful answer about GeekWire. If you go to these GeekWire events, you'll meet people. And don't just go to one or two. If you show up at a lot of them, people will then start to recognize you. And and people have done a lot of business at our events, meeting other co-founders. We have tons of those stories, or forging partnerships, with big companies. They're a small startup, but then they keep seeing the relationship manager from Amazon always at the GeekWire events, and then they end up having a drink together, and then they do business. So putting yourself in play is really important. But other than that, I would say reach deep into your past. It's a little bit scary to me how many of my co-founders across all of the different businesses are either someone that I might have worked with in the past, or in some cases someone I knew from like my childhood.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Maybe there's another point that is surfacing there. Again, I think it underscores that it's that Malcolm Gladwell Outliers thing where there's like a wave that you're riding. Maybe it's just a lot of, unfortunately, men my age, of this age bracket, we came up to speed on the personal computer at just the right age, and so now we're kind of, that wave is deposited on the same beach.
Right.
I'm not sure, but I do think that applies. Is that there's this notion of just the people who, we all have pretty vast personal networks, and look into your past to find people as well.
And has it always been the case that you have found other engineers, or do you have an engineering background? Or
I do not have an engineering background. I do want to say one thing, because I want to make sure this is useful, and not so platt. I think while it's scary how many of my co-founders are people that I've known a long time, before I started being an entrepreneur. At the same time, many of my co-founders are also, I've known them for a long time, but how I met them was the result of me being very, very expansive the aforementioned the other co-owner with me on the Spitfire was someone who was the boy. He was a guy that was dating this woman that I knew from work. And I just thought he was a cool guy, and I was always like, Jerry, tell me about what you do. You're a lawyer, yeah? What kind of lawyer are you? And we struck up a friendship. And so if you are able to be very sort of open in your overall posture in terms of meeting new people and without an agenda, this is one of those things. It's like a long-term thing. If you've been doing that. Being really open with meeting people from all walks of life, over time, that's a huge asset. You can kind of cash in on that, so to speak, later. You get an ROI. Yeah.
That's super helpful. Okay, I am going to ask the last question, and then we'll kind of open it up to the group. There's some questions in there. Feel free to pick one, or if based on what you've heard today, you have some other questions, please feel free. So have you mentioned you are an angel investor, but
yeah.
For your own businesses, did you go the VC route? Did you get angel investment? How did you get the capital for?
So yeah, this is an instance where I'm a contradiction. So yeah, the answer to your question is no. Never raised a single dime. For myself.
Right.
I raise it for other people. When I kick off, Pocket Doc or a Glam Hive or whatever, I'll get Rudy Gaudre, Jeff Ventris in a room, and I'll say I'm putting in $1. Rudy, you put in $1, and so I understand the process, but I don't like it for myself. When I'm doing my own, when it's a startup that I'm taking an operating role in, and it's about.
So tell me about your thinking. Like, why are you somewhat averse to it for yourself? And initially,
yeah.
Like, were you just always a baller and had lots of money, or did you, like, when you with FatBits, did you just kind of take it bit by bit? Like, how did
it was
you
bit by bit.
it?
It was bit by bit. The startup capital for FatBits was less than what you might pay for a new car. It was. The big win there was my co-founders being willing to take that risk with me,
Right.
and working for very, very little compensation, just enough to kind of eke by. We all made that agreement with each other. It's like, look, let's tighten the belts, and we were lucky we didn't have. I always, they were similarly of the same values as me, where everybody sort of deferred things. They didn't. Hey, if the car that they had owned for 10 years is good, why buy a new one, right? Let's keep it running, and we're good. And so we were all very frugal people, and so we were all able to operate within the first 6 to 9 months on very little. And I think that is a very powerful thing, because ultimately why I say no to raising a lot of money off the bat is that when you're raising money, and now raising an angel round is really the same as, not any different than a Series A 5 or 6 years ago. Angels are very sophisticated, and the way that the deals are structured are very sophisticated. When you're raising a round, that's all you're doing. You're not making product. You're not hiring your engineers or recruiting. You're not marketing. You're not, whatever it is, you're not doing the real thing. You're doing all this song and dance to raise money. Now, I don't want to put, because some startups, you're fundamental to the nature of the startup, you need to do that. You need to go out, look, it's hardware based. I need to make 10,000 of these things in China, and that's just going to cost $1 million, right? So, but if you've picked a concept like the ones that I picked, where if you got a laptop, you're open for business, right? There's this, it's all high volume, potentially high margin, low cost of goods.
Right.
Then I would say to think about a way to do it without raising money, because it's very time intensive to do that. And I think the third reason why I'm personally averse to raising outside money is because it's not so much losing control, because at the angel round, most people will leave you alone. Most will leave you alone. So on occasion, you'll get somebody who's a bit of a, calls you up on the phone every week if something's not right. But most will leave you alone. It's really more about interference, a high signal to noise ratio. Again, maybe it's the same thing as saying focus. That you don't need, you're already going to have a lot of discussion, robust conversations and debates, and maybe even knockdown, drag-out fights with your co-founders about what you're building. You need fewer voices at that point, not more. And so that's another reason.